much. Jason, I'll start with you. You're more bullish on the company. The momentum is there. Is the fundamental story enough to keep Apple past this $1 trillion mark?
Yeah, we think it is. I mean, if you look at the most recent quarter, obviously the iPhone business is now a stable business. ASPs are going up dramatically given the new device lineup. We're looking at fantastic growth in the services business, which carries higher margins, and we think is kind of the new growth story for the day, and I've been saying that for some time now. And then obviously the capital returns program puts a nice bow on it, so we continue to think that with that and a cheap stock, that Apple is still something you can own for the long term.
Ed, talk to us about your view on the stock and why you are not so constructive.
Well, I agree in the short term, and this is a great milestone for Apple, and the results were strong. But the core problem you're facing with the phone, with the services, with everybody else is it's driven by the phone. So you've been flat to down in phones for 3 years running, which is not a stunning development. It's to be expected, but it's not a good sign because your services businesses is not going to grow if your phone business starts to shrink. And the best correlate for this is exactly what happened to RIM, which we have Blackberry today, which is a footnote in today's phone market, but used to be the Apple of its time if you go back to 2005 when Apple was doing iPod. So if you've been around the phone business for a while, and we've covered for 20 years, we've seen this cycle before. They're not in any danger today, so it's going to be a long arc. But it's troubling to see that their unit volumes are starting to falter, and they got to do something about that.
Is that troubling, Jason, if unit volumes are falling at the same time that average selling prices are rising?
So our view has been that analysts and investors that are overly concerned about unit volume growth are missing the big picture. If this is just a GDP business, if hardware devices is just a GDP business going forward, which is a fair terminal growth rate for that type of business, and the penetration rate of higher margin services right now at about 15% of the installed base, an installed base of 1.3 billion or so devices globally, if that penetration rate goes up and if ASPs go up, this is going to be a tens of billion dollar business for Apple over the next few years. I mean, we're already looking at a $40 billion run rate, but services alone, just based on average annual ASPs and services, can totally replace the iPhone business with higher margins. And that assumes, like I said, very little growth in devices.
But Jason, the services business, a large part of it is Apple Music, and we know from the likes of Spotify and Pandora that that's still a loss-making business despite being relatively mature. It's a good few years old already.
Yeah, certainly. Some of that is Apple Music, you're right. But cross-selling matters, right? And the stickiness and the importance of the Apple ecosystem is not just paying for one subscription, it's paying for multiple subscriptions, and it's not just one device like Blackberry. We're talking about phones, we're talking about tablets, we're talking about watches, we're talking about ultimately connected home if Apple pulls that off, which we think they will. We're talking about cars, we're talking about a whole host of touch points with the consumer. This is a consumer business, and consumer businesses like Pepsi are getting PEs in the low 20s. Should Apple be getting a PE at 15 or less with a business that we just described? So it doesn't make sense to us, and we're pretty comfortable with the growth story for now.
Just quickly, final thought. Without the buybacks, would we be seeing a share price much less support at the moment when they go away? Do you think that could be a catalyst for a pullback?
Yeah, I think that's the issue. I totally agree the PE will go up, but only when you start returning more capital to shareholders, and that usually happens when you don't have a growth story anymore, and you're going to see that. You're seeing it with tech, you're starting to see it with Apple now. So it's a good business. It'll last for a while. It's not going to collapse. But I think with the enthusiasm we've seen on the $1 trillion stock price, you're probably going to see a pullback.